Hey everyone, welcome to the new first session of our Pilot Bootcamp. My name's Connor, I'm the instructor for this course, and also I am the head of Script Camp, which is part of Skill Camp, which includes many of our other servers. Whoops, let me just fix that real quick. We have many other different servers that are oriented towards different topics of learning, so we have lots of free and low-cost classes to help you reach your life goals. My life goal right now is getting better green screen setup. Let me take you to our first slides here. So we are in a stage style channel at the moment, meaning that you do have to raise your hand if you want to be heard speaking aloud. You can do that by clicking that hand icon at the bottom of the screen, at which point I can bring you up onto the stage. Once I invite you to the stage, you will have to click the accept invitation button, which looks like this green bar at the top of the screen. What else? Skill Camp includes many of these other servers here. You can feel free to just join any of these at any time. Script Camp and Word Camp are our biggest ones. With Script Camp being the biggest, we're dedicated to helping you go from idea to finished draft of scripts, so features and TV shows. Word Camp is for novel writing, and we have a novel boot camp that runs every Saturday from 12 to 2. And then, what else? We have the other servers that you can see here, and more being added. The most recent one was Game Camp, which is oriented towards game design. Lingo Camp for language learning classes, which we've been having on Wednesdays. Toon Camp for animation workshops and classes. Film Camp for filmmaking. Code Camp for coding. And with more rolling out soon. So check back, and you'll be able to see all these different classes in their respective servers. Although usually on Script Camp we will announce most of them, so you'll see them in the events tab, just because this is kind of like our main server at the moment, because it's the first and biggest one. We have a question from Dr. Evil Genius on Twitch. Hi, Dr. Evil. Will this be useful for comic writing? To some extent, I would say yes. There are very specific differences and rules that pertain to comic writing, and like the structure and page counts of the scripts and things like that are going to be pretty different. So some fundamentals definitely will apply, but I would start reading comic scripts if you're not sure what they look like, or you really want to get into that aspect of this specifically. Then I would look towards resources that are more oriented that way, personally. Okay, so my name's Connor. I have been repped since 2017 as a screenwriter in Hollywood. That's when I got signed for the first time off my script, Peter and the Wolves, which was Launchpad Top 10, Nicholl quarterfinals. Since then, I've placed in Nicholl semifinals, have had a few scripts set up at production companies in town, and recently advanced to second round of Sundance Labs. I teach the boot camps in weekly Writers Lab, and also the novel boot camp. Here's the dates and times. We have Pilot, that's running Sundays 10 to noon, starting today, for 6 weeks. Feature boot camp starts next week, December 1st. That's next week, right? Or is that in 2 weeks? It's the 19th now, so I guess that's more like almost 2 weeks. That's going to be running Fridays 6 to 8 p.m. Pacific time. And then we have Novel Bootcamp that started 5 weeks ago, but you can still come by these classes if you want to. If you're an unlimited member, then you can drop in any class at any time. That's 12 to 2 p.m. on Saturdays. All right, here's the overview for the entire class. Week 0 today is on premise and logline and just on the very fundamentals of writing pilots and writing for TV in general. We have next week on story engine and logline, and of course we will talk about story engines and touch on them a little bit today. We just won't kind of expand on them as much as we will in the later classes. So week 2 is outlining. We start with broad strokes and story beats, and then we expand the list of story beats into a full set of scene cards in the following week, which is December 17th. From there on, you're going to be writing about an act a week, meaning 10 pages per week if you're writing half hour and 20 pages per week if you're writing full hour. And that's going to be January 7th for first act, January 14th, second act, and then third act January 21st, with the intention of finishing the script by January 28th. So we do have the Thanksgiving and Christmas right in the middle of that. So this one is getting pushed out a little longer than some of our other boot camps have been. But in any case, there's 6 class meetings after this one until you will finish the scripts entirely. You do not need to download screenwriting software until halfway through the course. As you can see, the first weeks 1, 2, and 3 are all about planning, pre-writing, and outlining. So you'll be doing all that in just Google Docs, basically. You do not need to get Final Draft or Writer Duet or Arc Studio or anything else. But once we get to week 4, then you will want to get one of those softwares and get used to it, because you should not be really writing screenplays in anything else besides professional screenwriting software. There's a lot of free options, so it's not like you have to buy anything extra. Okay, so maybe let's just start with a quick discussion. Anyone can feel free to raise a hand. In a few sentences, just tell us about yourself. What is your experience level? What are you hoping to write? What kind of genre are you interested in, or your favorite TV writers or shows or things like this? Feel free to let us know anything that you want to share about yourself or your goals or intentions. You can raise a hand and I'll call on you, or you can use the text chats. You can mouse over the left-hand part of the Discord window where it says Classroom and click the small white word bubble that says Open Chat. If you do that, I will be able to read your text comments. If you are watching on Twitch or Twitter or something like this, you can also leave comments and I will be able to see them, but it usually takes an extra minute or two. Okay, so whatever you guys have got that you want to share, I will either read out the comments or call on raised hands. We have one comment. I'm writing a memoir/comedy about my life. Interesting. Okay, TV shows rarely make good biographies just because they are kind of like written by big staffs. The demands of a TV show are kind of different than the demands of a single work of fiction like a memoir or a movie, which kind of tells one concrete story, whereas a TV show is supposed to kind of be able to go on for years and years. So it's unusual, but then again, we have seen some of this. We have seen a couple examples of that in the past, so while it's unusual, it's not like it can't work. Emily says, I love writing romantic dramedy and some sci-fi. I love K-dramas and my big fat Greek wedding. Awesome. Thanks, Emily. She says, I'm hoping to work on 30 projects in the next 40 years. Okay, great. So that's like one project a year with 10 years off. Perfect. Anyone else? Let's see. Temi says, it's a question, not an introduction. He says, how do I prepare outlines for multifaceted stories that branch into other topics that go beyond the plot, such as politics, culture, ways of life, etc.? That sounds like it might be a little bit beyond the scope of the class today. We're not really going to get as much into structure and outlining today, as we're going to be talking about just basic premises for shows and the one-sentence expression of that plot, which is the logline. So it's a good question. I'm glad you asked, but I would say that's more of a week 2 or 3 type of topic. I would love to expand on that more later. Come back next week. Eden says, I'm developing a pilot about genetically engineered slaves, drama/animation, kind of a comment on the nature of humanity. Awesome, thank you, Eden. And Joel says, I have a lot of subplots and hints for the rest of my series in the pilots. Great, yep, you can definitely do this. It's just that, for the most part, we have to not hold the good stuff back, so just make sure that you're not setting up good stuff for later that could have been in the pilot. But yes, you're correct that there are some threads that must remain not entirely tied off by the end of a pilot. At least in a premise pilot, we should leave some road to go down where the characters have more room to grow, there are more questions to be resolved, and more antagonists to be defeated. There's just like a big splotch of sunlight. It happens to be coming through directly on my green screen today. My green screen actually broke, so it's kind of sagging to the side now. I think I actually need a new one. Or just some green paint and a wall. I could also do that. All right, we have a comment from Ravenstar that says, my favorite shows are Gravity Falls, Avatar, and The Good Place. I like fantasy, sci-fi, and horror comedies with themes of existentialism. I've been writing screenplays for several years, had a screenplay and quarterfinalist in Script Lab's screenwriting contest. My goals are to have my current passion projects be made into animated series. Awesome, thank you, Raven. Vicky says, I went to film school in Chile. I have 2 young children. Animation series children's animation series, not 2 young children. I have 2 young animation series that I've worked on that are on YouTube, trying to write more adult animation now. Awesome, thanks, Vicky. There's not a ton of differences between how you'd write an animated pilot versus a live-action one. You can kind of pick whatever you want. It's all text anyway. Watemi says, I'm working on a unique story that blends the best of Death Note, Persona 5, and Inception. A story about robbing people's minds and driving them into insanity. Okay, cool. Sounds creative. Thank you for that. Looks like is that the last of our comments? Anyone else can feel free to speak up if they'd like to. I'm going to move to the next slide, but I will come back and check the text chat now and then. Okay. Let's move to our next slide. So this is just more overview kind of stuff. We're writing a pilot in 6 weeks. Will this draft be good? No. It's the first draft, and first drafts are never really good. And if you're just starting at this, you're just getting going and learning the basics, then, your first ever painting is not going to get hung in a museum for the most part. And this is a similar thing. Like, your show's probably not going to get made. 99.999% of shows do not get made from pilots. Think about this as a multi-million-dollar company that will employ hundreds of people for many years, and you will maybe start to see why not that many shows get made. And of the ones that do, they're largely created by highly experienced and entrenched showrunners, like highly established showrunners and creatives. So don't go into this expecting to get a TV show made. It takes many, 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 many years of work to get to the point where you're going to be, your skills will be to the point where they need to be, where you can be getting placements in contests and fellowships and start getting meetings with managers and things like this. And then from there, your journey's still not done because your manager has to then work with you back and forth to develop a sample that you'll then send out during staffing season and hopefully get showrunner meetings and then nail the showrunner meetings. But it can fail or fall apart at like 9 different steps along the way. So all you can really control is the quality of your content and your kind of work ethic and output. So I would focus on that because there's no real point in networking and getting meetings and things unless your work is really there and you have a large body of work in your portfolio that says that I am not only able to make one great script, but I'm a generator of sort of unlimited great scripts, which is what they're looking to hire for TV shows. They're not looking for somebody that wrote one good episode of a theoretical pilot for a show that does not exist. They're looking for writers that bring a diverse array of experiences and backgrounds into the room, and also an array of different skill sets and specialties. For instance, some people are really good at dialogue, some are really good at structure, etc. So you're going to try to fill out that team, or they're going to try to fill out the team with folks that fill in those various roles. So we'll get a little more into the business of it today. Not that much, though, because we should really just be spending this time on figuring out what are some good premises for the TV shows that you'd like to be writing in this course, which is why we'll spend so long on that today. At least the second hour of the class, if you're just joining us, will be on giving feedback on loglines. We have 20 people in the room, so we may not be able to get to every single one, especially if I have a lot of questions and clarifications for them. So we'll be getting to those in the order that they come in. So don't post those yet. Again, wait till I call for it, but then at the halfway mark around there, I will say post your loglines. You can do so in the chat, and I will get to as many as I can within the time. Okay, but right now you can, if you haven't already done this, you can make your sketchbook right now. So go ahead and go to Google Docs, make a new document, title it just name of your show, sketchbook, or if you don't have a name for the show for whatever reason, then just untitled drama, sketchbook, whatever you want to call it. At the top, you have to have a little checklist here, so these are the things you're going to try to fill out today if you can. If you can't fill out everything in the list or it's not perfect yet, that's okay because it sometimes takes a little bit of refinement in order to get all these things down exactly. But at the top, you should include these things. So fields for title, field for genre, format/time slot, comps, series logline, and pilot logline. And if you know any of the answers to those things now, you can fill in whatever you have. If not, keep working at it, keep filling these things out throughout the class today. Question from Emily. If you have an ensemble cast, how should you approach episode loglines? Well, the nice thing is you never have to write a logline for anything besides a pilot, nor do you ever have to write anything besides the pilot. Nobody's going to read beyond the pilot, ever. It is therefore only the single logline that you have to worry about for that pilot episode and the logline for the whole show. If there's an ensemble cast, then it's helpful if you find the focal point of that ensemble cast. So frame it around one character as sort of being the lead of that ensemble, if at all you can. That would be something, like Lost is a huge show with a huge ensemble cast. Who's the main character? Jack. So you can almost always boil this down to a kind of main character to frame everything around. But for a series logline, you might want to express it a little bit. If it really is a true ensemble show like This Is Us or something like that, then you might want to say, kind of link everything together a little bit more around the things that they share or have in common. Like, 3 different families all have police officer sons or something like that, and they all are trying to rise through the ranks of the specific, Idaho Police Department or whatever it is, right? So emphasize whatever those people have in common and whatever common goals that they're trying to strive for and achieve. But then in the pilot logline, you still probably have to frame it around one person's journey, even if there are other ones that orbit them. So just something to keep in mind. Ensemble shows really, really, really hard to manage and pull off. If it's your first script, definitely don't write an ensemble show. Question from Watemi. If you only need to write a pilot, how do you ensure that your story's direction is still intact? You can't. There is no way to do that. And when you sell a show, there are executive producers that are above you that ultimately can fire you if they don't like the direction that you're taking it. There is absolutely zero way to ensure that your original intentions and direction of the show are intact, unless you are paying for the whole show yourself. In those rare cases, you can do whatever you want. So, couple tips and ground rules for a pilot bootcamp and the kinds of ideas that you should choose. I recommend don't do true stories, don't do anthologies, and don't do adaptations, or anything that would require a substantial amount of research that that would slow down your ability to write a script in 6 weeks, because this is such like a condensed time frame. Normally, when you get an assignment to write a script, you get 10 weeks or something a little more like 10 to 12. So this is a quick version of this. Don't do stuff that will slow you down. So that would be anything that would require lots of research or require you to get the story just right or have to do a lot of interviews, or it's like a family history or something like this, and if you get it wrong, your family will disown you or anything like that. So don't do stuff that you have a strong connection to that you have to get right. It's going to actually be to your benefit to pick something that is a little bit more, I don't want to necessarily say disposable, but a little fresher and newer in your mind, and you won't be as devastated if you can't get it perfect, because your first couple scripts are not going to be perfect at all. And you need to not let that stand in the way of finishing them, because what are they? Perfect is the enemy of good, isn't that what they say? So try not to worry about getting this just right or perfect, or even having it be any good at all. It's fine if it's not. It's your job to write 100 bad scripts. So probably don't do a historical unless you have background in studying that time period already, or those cast of characters. If you were like a history major in school or something like that, maybe you don't need to do that much extra research. Don't write time travel. Just believe me. Just don't. We've never seen somebody successfully complete a time travel script in a boot camp. They have a lot of challenges, and the feedback you're going to be getting, especially if you're pretty new at writing, most of the feedback you'll get on a time travel script will be questions about what happened, how the paradoxes are working, and things like this, where you just don't want the majority of the notes that you're getting to be basic story logic questions as to what happened. You want the notes to focus on things that you are able to, or that you want them to focus on craft topics like character, dialogue, structure, things like this. We have more questions in the chat. In that case, why would you want to write a pilot beyond monetary goals? Why do you want to write a pilot? Because you want to be a TV writer, because you have stories in your mind that you feel would be best executed over the course of multiple years, as opposed to just in one single kind of work of fiction, and because you are very collaborative. This is a very, very, very collaborative form of writing, and if you successfully sell a show, in theory, some of the best writers in the world will be working on that show together with you. It's not to say that there's no reason to write a TV show except for making money. It's just to say that very few people have absolute control over something that is as big and expensive and expansive as a TV show. So I wouldn't go into this hoping for sort of dictatorial control. It's $100 million company that employs 100 people. Like, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen that are not just you, and you need to seed some of that kind of. I know as writers we're all sort of control freaks that want. Me too. I want this as well. Everybody wants total control over the world, but to work in TV you have to give up a lot of that control. Question from Emily. Advice for if you have an idea it seems like a feature idea, how to make it strong enough engine to last for multiple episodes and seasons. So first of all, if it feels more like a feature idea, I would probably just write it as a feature. So, but that aside, if you have something that seems like it feels a little more right now like a feature idea that you are trying to develop into a series, you need a couple things. One, a bigger problem that your characters are going to have to take longer to resolve. You need a bigger cast, so more characters, or a more fleshed out cast. For instance, some characters on the villain side, for instance, if you have that simple breakdown of heroes and villains, maybe your show doesn't even feel like it has heroes and villains at all. Maybe everyone's kind of various shades of gray, and we need, in that case, just a wider and more interesting cast than you had before. So it's really just going to come down to number of people and scope of the goal. Or it could always also come down to something like, if you have a different goal season by season, then you need to more carefully define how that's going to kind of function anthologically, and how every season is going to have its own different separate goal. Something like Fargo on FX is kind of like its own weird format of semi-anthological seasons or something like that. So you just have to make it very clear how it's going to last for years. I'll take one more question from the chat, and then I'll keep going. What's to stop production companies stealing the idea and not involving you, the writer? Well, it is usually easier for a production company to pay the person who's pitching the idea rather than pay somebody else to execute on the same or a similar idea. There are various initiatives, for instance, in the guild, like this no writing left behind rule, where in the early stages of pitching, we're not actually, there has been a push in recent years to not actually leave documents with them. We're entirely pitching verbally or over the phone or in Zoom or in person or anything else. And then if they decide they like the idea, we say something like, well, if you want to do the rest, then you can option the show, or you can option the pilot, and then I will do more writing for you. So that's like one little tactic. But if ultimately you pitch a show about, I don't know, Roman soldiers, and then they're like, well, I didn't like that specific idea, but we'd love to do a show about Roman soldiers, there's nothing that will stop anyone from doing that. You don't own the idea of Roman soldiers, or even a drama about Roman soldiers. So I wouldn't worry that much about this. I would mostly focus on getting your craft where it needs to be. This is sort of like saying, well, what if I'm a multi-million, like, what if I'm a huge baseball player and multiple teams want to recruit me to their team? What do I do then? How do I pick? It's a later down the line problem. You need to worry first about becoming the writer that would have multiple, that would have companies that want to steal your ideas. It's quite difficult to come up with good ideas for TV shows or movies. In the sense that, well, I guess I would say on one hand, ideas are cheap, right? Ideas are kind of a dime a dozen. It's specific execution of those ideas where the real skill and the real value is. Anyone can write a show about Roman soldiers, but only one person can write your vision for a show about Roman soldiers. Yeah, Emily says you can't copyright an idea. Exactly. You can't really copyright a broad idea, only the specific execution of that idea. So if you don't have a great idea yet, maybe just think of doing something weird and different, something that will keep you excited and motivated and interested. Think of some genre mashup that you've never seen before that would just be fun and would provide an interesting challenge for you to try to write. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece, and it doesn't have to be something deeply personal to you. It should be something that will just keep you motivated and interested and excited to write for 6 weeks. And then once it's done, you can go back and edit it later if you want to, but if you don't have to. And often you will learn a little more from just writing the next script, if this is your first script. If this is your 5th or 6th script, probably it's time for you to learn to rewrite. But until you get to 5 or 6 scripts, I would mostly focus on writing as great of a first draft as you can, finish it, and write the end, and make sure that it's complete, that it has no placeholders in it or scenes missing or anything like that, and then just write the next one. And then once you do a couple, you can look back at the early ones and start sort of revising, but until you get the work done and sort of teach yourself how you write, it's going to be a lot harder to write a whole portfolio of scripts. So, if you are bringing a rewrite to the class, this is not really oriented exactly for rewrites, and notes are not included in these courses, so I'm not going to read every script, give you notes, and then have everybody act on those notes and edit and stuff like that. We have done rewrite courses in the past before that are focused on that, so you can find recordings of those if you want to know some strategies for rewriting. But in any case, you do have to get the notes yourself on your own if you are bringing a rewrite here. So I do see more questions piling up in the chat. We want to maybe just touch on the very basics of TV writing before I answer a few more, but feel free, of course, to keep asking these, and I would be glad to keep taking them. We even, oh no, there's no more comments from the other streams. But again, if you're watching on anything else, like Twitch, Twitter, or Facebook, you can leave comments. I will be able to see them a few minutes later. Or you can come join us on Discord. We are Script Camp. You can come find us at scriptcamp.net. And scroll down, you can find a subscription for unlimited membership if you're interested in taking classes beyond the free intros like this one. You can sign up for as low as $19 a month if you're buying yearly. If you're getting monthly, it's just $29 a month for unlimited classes on all of our different servers with over 100 hours of content every month. Full access to video library recordings of every previous class, exclusive channels and labs and events. So there's plenty of value in subscribing, or you can just stick around for the free events and participate in the community that we have here either way, we are glad to have you along. Okay, so what else? TV basics. Let's just touch on the very essentials here. So in the US, TV is written by staffs for the most part. There are some exceptions to that, but it's mostly written by staffs, which consists of a hierarchy of staff writers at the lowest end, and then a hierarchy of writing producers above them. In TV, producers are writers. So all the producer credits you see on TV shows are writers of that show. And then above all of them is the showrunner, who's the person really in charge of everything. That's kind of like the boss of the show. And they're the head of both writing and production. It takes like a long time to become a showrunner for the most part. The number of staff writers can be anywhere from just a few on sort of more singular voice shows, all the way up to maybe 15 or more on big cartoons, comedies, late night, or things like that. Comedy rooms are bigger than drama rooms for the most part. Let's go through some basic terms. Spec, S-P-E-C, stands for speculative, and it's a term that actually refers to several different separate ideas in TV writing. And so let's go through the essentials of specs. In features, a spec is a script that you've written on your own that has been commissioned by nobody, that is for the express purpose of either getting you work, getting you meetings, acting as a writing sample, or even acting as something that you're querying to production companies to try to get that thing made, or maybe just to try to get signed. In TV, a spec is also similar to that. A spec pilot is usually just called a pilot, and it's an original first episode of a theoretical TV show that does not exist, and probably will never exist, so don't go into this thinking, I'm going to get my show made. And a spec episode, as they say, or sometimes we will call this... there's actually a couple other terms for this. I can't recall right now. But a spec episode is like a sort of fan fiction type episode of an existing show that is on TV right now, and that is within its first couple seasons usually, and is critically well liked, is kind of like how you pick which one you're going to do. Most fellowships and contests that you'll be entering with these, which is, by the way, one of the only uses for these nowadays. Most showrunners don't like to read spec episodes anymore. They prefer to read original pilots, but there are some contests and fellowships like the Nickelodeon Writing Fellowship where you can write an episode of SpongeBob or whatever, and then include that as part of your entry. These are rarely needed, so don't really focus on these, but for entering certain types of events as a TV writer, it's good to have maybe one or two of these in your back pocket. Okay, so that's the weird distinction between the word spec. So most of the time when we're talking about pilots, they are not part of an existing show or universe. There's no fan fiction, and you're not using anyone's copyrighted material. So if you're like, I have a great idea for a Spider-Man TV show, you can write it as a writing sample if you really, 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 really want to, but usually you can't include those in a portfolio. People are going to be less willing to read fanfiction type stuff, so you should be writing original material. That is the most useful, objectively most useful thing for a TV writer's portfolio. So how do you get staffed on a show? Well, you need to have an incredible portfolio, which takes many years to do that. So do that first. So get really, 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 really good at writing pilots, as well as other stuff, because sometimes other stuff can also get you attention, get you noticed by managers or agents that are looking for TV writers. So plays are a big one, especially if you're starring in those plays that you're like a writer, director, actor, hyphenate, kind of multi-hyphenate as they call them. Also, stand-up is another really big one for comedy staffing, and shows like SNL. They are going to stand-up shows in New York and looking for the best talent to recruit for late night. So you need to have a breadth of different types of work, web series, books, features, or anything else just within your kind of portfolio in order to show what you can do and to demonstrate your level of craft. There's no real point in getting these meetings unless you are excellent at what you do, and it takes a long time and a lot of work to become excellent at this. You could also go through the assistant track where you have to be in LA for this, but you can spend, again, many years working up the hierarchy of starting as a office PA, moving to writer's PA, moving up to writer's assistant, and then perhaps moving up to showrunner's assistant after that. And then at that point, they might read your episodes, they might start to mentor you over time, and eventually offer to read your scripts. And if they do read your scripts and then really like them, then they might consider staffing you on that show for the following season. Unless your show gets canceled, which can happen sometimes, or any number of things can go wrong. Part of the reason it takes so many years is because it can fall apart at like 100 different points. So all you can control is the work that you put into it and the quality of, like the amount of work that you put in and the quality of your portfolio. Those are within your control. So you have to just be the most employable, most easy to work with person you can possibly be. There's a lot of aspects that go into that. Being good in a room is what they call it. That's what it's called when you are easy to work with, nice, kind, you have good social skills, you, I don't know, wear pants and deodorant and things like that. Like, these might sound almost silly or trivial, but these are things that not every writer is doing, and they do matter when you're going to be writing in rooms with people for 12 to 15 hours for years of your life. They want to know that it's going to be okay to be around you for that amount of time, that you're not annoying or you don't say weird racist stuff or like any of these things. Like, you have to actually have an easy to work with personality. The personality is so huge. The social aspect of this is massive when it comes to TV writing, eventually down the line. Right now, just focus on writing good scripts, because that is much more craft based, right? There is a certain kind of craft, I guess you could say, to being good in a room and to being personable and social and good at doing things like assessing problems and ideas without shooting them down or tearing them apart in a mean, unnecessary way. You can also develop this thicker skin and practice taking notes well and receiving feedback well and not getting upset, defensive, or anything else. You have to be ready for these rooms to kind of roast you sometimes. Like, TV writers are kind of savage to some extent, and depending on the culture of their room, maybe you pitch a joke and somebody goes like, worst joke I've ever heard, like in front of the whole room, everyone laughs. Like, that might be possible, and you can't take it too personally. You have to understand sometimes you're joining a room that has been writing together for years, and you're the newbie there, and you need to kind of learn to acclimate to their culture. Instead of insisting on everyone working more like you work, you have to learn how the dynamic that exists works and try to fit seamlessly into that and, not get fired. Okay, I'll stop and take a couple more questions from the chat. Looks like nobody wants to wear pants, which that is a problem in TV writing. You might want to consider it. But Tommy says, am I discouraged to write more episodes beyond a pilot? Yeah, never do that. There's no point in writing more episodes beyond a pilot ever in your entire life. What else? I pitched my idea to a theater company and already performed a 15-minute show. I don't know if it should be a full theater show, memoir, book, or TV series. Yeah, well, it's up to you. It could be multiple of those things, or you could start it out. Sometimes people start out on stage and then expand the idea into more of like a different medium afterwards. Something like Fleabag by Phoebe Waller-Bridge was a play. Mindy Kaling got her start doing plays and one-woman shows in LA. So yeah, there's lots of different routes you can go. Here's another question. Should we jump into writing a passion project, or should we write something we aren't emotionally attached to? Something you are not emotionally attached to, 100%. I think that's the questions for now. TikTok following does not make much of a difference, right? Well, it doesn't hurt. I mean, it's not going to get you staffed or be an advantage in a meeting, but if you have like hundreds of thousands of views on like narrative content of some kind, then that could potentially reflect well during staffing and be a plus. Yeah, for sure. It would be helpful if you were in the content yourself, so you were the star of those things. That would probably be a little more useful than if you were just making them. But then again, a huge following is a huge following, so it will never hurt. Okay. It looks like all the text questions for the moment. I think I'm going to skip ahead a couple slides, and we will move to talking about loglines for the next 20 or so, just so that we can have enough time to get to as many logline feedbacks as possible. Feedback sessions, I can give as much feedback as possible. So I'll get out of the way here so you can read the overview. So we start with logline. Logline is that first sentence that kind of guides the rest of the construction of your pilot. It's really useful for a couple of reasons. One is to tell people what your show is about and get them to read your episode. And next is useful for you to stay on track and to not drift too far from your original goals, intention, or vision for that particular work. The logline goes in the sketchbook, so maybe we would say sketchbook comes first, but at the top of your sketchbook, that's where I usually do the logline figuring out. So you might write a couple versions of it or workshop it a little bit and adjust and edit it right there on your sketchbook. The sketchbook is just an unsorted list of ideas, research, influences, inspiration. Anything else? Maybe I'll just move ahead to do I have a sketchbook slide? Yeah, here it is. So the sketchbook, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's a place to collect your notes, sketches, and ideas, flesh out the characters, come up with ideas for lines of dialogue, or possible scenes, endings, setting and story details, photos, drawings, articles, links, or anything else that is going to inspire and inform the writing of your show. So there's no right or wrong format for this. There's nothing that needs to or needs to not be in a sketchbook. It's for anything and everything that pertain to this specific idea. And I recommend just doing it on Google Docs or some other cloud-based document service that you can access from anywhere. You can write on it on your phone, you can write it on your computer, whatever is easiest for you. So we start with logline sketchbook. Story beats is the next step. Story beats are going to be a list of most of the scenes in the order that they're supposed to go in, with an idea of how one thing leads to the next. So it's going to be like a sentence or two per major plot beat. It doesn't have to include every single scene, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and there can be scenes missing. There can be various problems with it. That's all totally fine. But in any case, story beats are going to be a broader outline of the entire story. Then we move to scene cards in the next week, which is going to be a more detailed expansion of the story beats into at least a full paragraph for every single scene with nothing missing. Every gap has been filled in. We've not only come up with every scene, but also assigned little names for each scene and assigned page numbers to each scene so we know roughly where it's going to fall in the story. And that way we can assess and keep a close watch on the pacing as we move through and ensure that we're not spending too much time or too little time on any individual scene. So this is a very kind of planning-focused approach. Some people have a little bit more improvisational and loose approaches to this where they just open a blank page and start writing a script. I don't use that tactic, and I don't recommend that tactic. And when you are starting to write in rooms or with staffs, then you pretty much can't do that anymore because you need to be able to plan out the episodes, work with the room and with the showrunner on figuring out what each episode in the whole show would be, and then you're going to have the basic outline in front of you. You then have to expand on that outline, turn it into the showrunner, they approve the outline, they give it, they give it back to you, and then at the end of the day, you have to execute on what's in that outline, because if you don't, they'll be like, this isn't what I asked for, this isn't what we agreed on. So writing and sticking to very strict outlines is actually a pretty important skill in writing for TV. If you don't yet have that skill, it's okay if you don't have it immediately, but you should work towards attaining that skill and full understanding of structure and organization of stories, because so much of this is taking stories apart and fitting them back together in ways that work. Question from Emily: what will be the format for the scene cards? Will we have further education before we go forth? We're not actually getting way too much into scene cards today. That's a week 3 topic, but I can just tell you there's not like a super special format for them. It's going to be a paragraph per scene, and above each paragraph, I include scene titles. And they don't have to be artistic. They're only for you, but it's for you to clarify what that scene is doing. So you might have a scene title that's just like, Sam meets Jake, or something like that, right? And next to that, you're going to have the pages that it takes place on. So maybe you anticipate that being a 2-page scene. So it'll say, Sam meets Jake, 1 to 2. And then underneath, about 4 or 5 sentences of what happens in that scene. And you just do that for the whole script. So I won't be showing examples of it, but it's not too complicated. That's just basically what it looks like. So once we finish scene cards, which is, again, by the end of week 3, so you do have 4 weeks to come up with your full set of scene cards, a full month just to figure out what happens on every single page of the script. It's kind of tough to do sometimes, but you have a lot of time to do it. So find the time, do the planning, and even if you've never tried this approach before, maybe give it a shot. You may find that not every single thing works that well for you, and you can always take and adjust and ignore any aspect of this process that you want to. I'm not saying you have to write things a certain way, and I definitely won't be reading everyone's scripts at the end to give comments on whether or not you succeeded or failed at your goals. So this is for your own development and education and learning how you write. We say the last step is go to pages, and what we mean, that's a term that is used very often for moving from pre-writing to actually formatting and writing the pages of the script. So you don't need to download your screenwriting software until that point. It's quite a ways down the road, so don't worry about it for now. If you're wondering what we recommend, Arc Studio or Writer Duet have great free versions. Okay, we have, what do we have, 15 minutes, so I hope everyone's writing down or working on your little why did I say little? Working on your little sketchbooks. Working on your sketchbooks, and starting to add things, and I would almost always recommend just having the sketchbook open during the class. I'm not going to get too into structure right now, but I'm going to move ahead a little bit to answer these questions and fill in these gaps of time slot and format, because these were other fields that you needed to fill out at the top of your sketchbook as you start to define just the very basics of what is your TV show. So TV shows come in basically two different forms. I know there's more than this, but essentially in the US there is 30-minute or 60-minute. There's, half hour or full hour. There's variations on exactly how many minutes they're going to take and whether or not they're commercial breaks and all these things. But essentially your options are half hour or full hour. Half hour script, 30 to 34 or 35 pages. 60-minute script, 60 to 65 pages. There are exceptions. And usually 30 minutes is going to be comedic or highly episodic type shows, but that's not always true. We have seen other examples of other types of stuff. The only real thing that's not exactly an option is hour-long comedy. That's the one thing that just doesn't really exist. There are hour-long dramedies and dark comedies and shows that have comedic elements in them, but if it's an hour long, there's going to be something else in there. And that's just the format that we have in Western media. In different cultures in different parts of the world, that might not be the case. Maybe there are hour-long comedies. We have a question. Isn't How I Met Your Mother closer to an hour-long comedy? Is it? I thought they're just half-hour episodes, aren't they? How long are How I Met Your Mother episodes? Quick Google search tells me 22 minutes. Yeah, so that's just a normal sitcom length. There are a couple shows that do blur the line a little bit. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is a show on CW, which is a comedy that is an hour, but it's a musical with multiple musical numbers per episode. And also it does have sort of more dark comedy, dramedy, sort of, a little more drama than you would think or see in most sitcoms. So not exactly a traditional sitcom. So you can pick whatever format you want. There's other formats too, like 15-minute web shows and things like this. I'd recommend, though, for a pilot in your portfolio, show that you can fit within the medium and you can follow the rules and you can write a 30-minute or a 60-minute show. So that's time slot. Then we have continuity format. Continuity format is telling us... hang on. Whoop. I think I actually... Where did my slide on that go? Didn't I have a full slide on that? Or did I skip it? 1 second. I think it might actually be way later down. Here it is. So, your two options for continuity formats. I define them as premise or status quo. Well, premise pilot is what everybody calls the hour. They're usually hour long, but they're not always. Premise pilots are shows that are like a long movie. We need to watch every episode in order to understand the full scope of the story. Status quo is the term I use. I don't really know what the actual industry term is for these, or if there is a consistent one, but they're just not premise shows, basically. Status quo shows are something where the continuity format, or the continuity resets every episode. So that would be like, The Simpsons, or Law and Order, where you can watch them in any order. There are kind of cast changes over a long time frame sometimes, or very long-term developments, but ultimately you can watch status quo shows in any order. You're not going to miss anything or be confused. You can just pick it up wherever. The stories don't really carry over from episode to episode. So you really need to know what kind of show you're doing, because in a premise show, there are some questions that are going to be unanswered at the end, some antagonists that will be undefeated, and there will be more story left, theoretically, after this. You might even have kind of a stinger at the end, which is like the post-credits scene that says, but this villain, they didn't actually beat him, he's coming for them next week. Or maybe we beat the first villain, and then you cut to the evil overlord's palace as he's like, no, they defeated my ghoul, now next week I'll have to send the ogre after them, wahaha. So you probably wouldn't have a teaser like that in a status quo show. A status quo show is going to end and wrap up every loose end, and it's going to sort of have this implicit promise that if you keep watching the show, it's going to have way more episodes like that, but it's going to tie off everything within the episode. So don't leave threads hanging if you're writing a status quo show. So that's a pretty big distinction there. So definitely make sure you know what you're doing. There is a little bit of line blurring here and there where it will be like a show that essentially is the same setup in every episode, but things do change over time. But because we're really only writing pilots, don't really worry about that kind of hybrid area. You should really only be writing something that concretely feels like it has substantially more story to tell, years of story to tell, or something that has wrapped up entirely and completely with a nice bow. Okay, so let me bring up this slide here, which is going to just lay out some of those essentials. I'll take questions on that if anyone wants to know more about premise versus status quo. But if not, I will move right ahead to expanding on series and pilot loglines, we can look at some examples, and we can, in about 10-15 minutes, we will post your guys' loglines to look at for feedback. Any questions on premise versus status quo, the continuity formats? We have a comment in the chat. House is a status quo show. Yep, a lot of medical or procedural type shows are going to be more status quo format. Procedural shows are ones that are usually based on some kind of institution like police, medical, or legal, but there's other examples too. There's some firefighter procedurals or EMS procedurals or things like this, where most of the time the characters aren't really like dying or leaving, except for rare exceptions. These are going to be very similar to the sitcom or the cartoon or something like this, right? Where every week there's a new thing of the week, a new problem of the week that needs to be solved. If there's a thing of the week, quote in quotes, somewhere in your show's idea, it's probably a status quo show. Okay, question. Are we outlining our idea for the entire theoretical show or only for the pilot? You're doing both. That's the tricky part. The status, or so there's two separate log lines, which we're about to get into. Let me just show my slide on that a little bit before we get to it. But the series log line and the pilot log line are two separate sentences, that one of which is going to clarify what the entire show would be, and one of which is telling us just what is happening in the pilot. So you're doing all of the above. But you don't need to flesh out and write the episodes for the show itself. You just want to have the sense that there could be a show here. We have another comment. Lucifer was another status quo show. I haven't seen that one, but yeah, I think that's sort of like a, that was a like fantasy comedy kind of thing with a main character that was like being mentored by the devil or something like that, or he is the devil. Okay, so let me go into the difference between the types of loglines that we're doing, and we'll look at some examples of the different loglines, and soon we will be sharing them. So, logline is just that one single sentence that is going to do a couple things. The series logline conveys the unique sense of the cast of characters, situations, or story world that promise many different episodes. And the series logline should ultimately go on to clarify what your story engine is. The story engine is something we will get more into next week, but essentially it is a combination of elements that promises many stories and interesting conflicts and plot arcs within this world. The engine isn't easily defined as just one thing. It's a combination of all of the different parts of your show working together to make it feel like it could go on for years. So the series logline is giving the broader sense of what we're doing in the entire show. A lot of the time, if your show centers on one person, you still will frame that protagonist in the series logline. But if you have a bigger ensemble, you may not really need to. You might just want to say something. You might need to kind of explain the overall cast of characters and the type of conflict or thing that they have in common, you know, the goal that they're all striving for, the place that they all work at, or something like that, and the types of conflicts that will permeate the rest of the series. The pilot logline is much more similar to a feature logline in that it has to be more brass tacks, concrete, and specific. What is the inciting incident? Who is the protagonist, and what is standing in their way? What are they trying to kind of accomplish, and what is the scope, time frame, or walls around the story, so the limits around the story. So those are two separate loglines. You don't need to have both completely perfect by the end of today, but you will be able to get feedback on one or both of them if you have those ready to share. Let's look at some examples, and then we will move into sharing them for feedback. If you are still working on yours, you can always come back next week. Next week's class is also a free week. Our week 0 and week 1 are both free, so you'll be able to take a little time if you feel you need to develop it a bit more before next week. So a film is supposed to embrace the core concept and deliver on it and execute on it as much as possible through the course of its 2-hour runtime, whereas series kind of builds on the core concept a lot of the times throughout the seasons, for premise shows at least. With a status quo show, often the premise doesn't build at all. But in any case, a TV series logline emphasizes compelling characters and intriguing worlds. So the series logline should be more about the world and the cast. What are we trying to do? We're trying to imply that the main action is going to be trackable through visuals The goals are going to be tangible. We want to avoid intangible goalposts, like purely internal objectives for the characters. If you're framing a logline like, he must understand blank, he must discuss blank, he must, your character must, the worst phrase ever that I hate and grinds my gears like nails on a chalkboard is, you must come to terms with something, because it just doesn't mean anything for us. It's a purely internal process that only your character knows when that's done or not done. We can't see that someone has come to terms with something. So you need to be focusing on an external journey that implies an internal journey, which will interweave with it, where one amplifies and strengthens the other, so as to suggest a fully rounded story. So that means mostly focus on the external. We don't really need to go and use your valuable few words that you have in a logline to talk about the themes. You don't need to talk about the emotional development of the characters or the emotional objectives of the characters. We need to say, brass tacks, this is what this person needs to do by this time in the sort of pilot logline. So think about, like, take Lord of the Rings, for example. Pretend that's a TV show. We could say Frodo must become the hero that he's destined to be and accept this great responsibility. That's his goal, right? Not really. That's his internal goal. His external goal is he needs to go across the world and throw a ring into a volcano. See what I mean? So we can imply that internal stuff, but you really just need to be specific on what action your main character needs to take to succeed. We also want to kind of showcase a unique and fascinating hook or sense of irony, a new or interesting different point of view, some variation of interesting elements combined with some familiar ones that we have seen before maybe, that are ultimately going to make this feel fresh and original and different. It doesn't have to be that original if this is in your first couple scripts and it's not like something you are, if you're not going to be submitting to managers, contests, or fellowships soon, you don't really have to worry that much about being original. It's better that you just have an idea that works and is a little bit more, we say, down the middle. Down the middle means it's kind of just exactly what you'd expect from that genre. I'm going to give you an example of a down the middle premise. When a serial killer begins to threaten the residents of a city, a grizzled and determined detective must take on the case to stop the killer before he strikes again. Okay, does that kind of work? Yeah, but does it sound like 10 trillion other TV shows? Also, yeah, so there's just nothing that would make someone feel like they have to tune into that, like they have to check that one out. Like a fan of the genre would say, oh, I haven't seen that one before. I always think of it as like there's been a pretty definitive version of most things, so you have to argue, you're competing against that, right? If you're writing a serial killer movie, well, we have 7 at home, right? So how the heck do you write a serial killer thriller after 7? Well, you make it stand out, you make it different, you make it feel not just like you're trying to essentially execute on the basic thing that we would expect in this genre, because that's been done at a very high level. If you're writing a middle grade fantasy story, you're competing with Harry Potter, sort of, right? I mean, we have Harry Potter at home. Why do we want to come check out your thing? So you have to kind of know what the answer to that is and what you bring to the table and what's unique and cool about this, what haven't we seen before exactly, and you should be a big fan of your genre. You need to know what fans are sick of seeing in your genre and what they would crave to see, and what would be exciting and different for them, and what would make them go, oh, I've got to check that one out, even though we have Harry Potter at home. So, guys, don't post your loglines yet, because we're going to lose them in the chat, and I haven't quite finished with the slides yet, so if you post now, I would delete the post and wait a second for us to call for those, so I don't lose track of it. Okay, so last couple things. So Story Engine we'll get more into next week. And this is just an element that should be apparent in your loglines. You don't need to specifically define, this is my story engine. I might have the note, the story engine isn't clear, if it doesn't feel like this is a show. If it feels like this is a show about a guy who wants to get a snack from a vending machine. It's like, for years? Like, what? How could that last for years? Unless you're like, oh, okay, in every episode, he gets so hungry that he has a different adventure every episode. Okay, maybe I could start to understand that one. But the story engine of just guy wants a snack from a vending machine is not that compelling. It doesn't feel like a show. There's no engine there. So make sure that you feel like you have a cast of characters in the loglines that are apparent to you, or that are apparent to the reader, the audience, and that we're sort of finding some combination of conflicts, dynamics, and large enough scope of goals that it feels like your show would be able to go on for years. So let's look at some examples of different log lines. I have a slide on genres too, which I will touch on if it feels like we need to, but at this point we just need to move ahead. So we'll look at, we also have comps, which I will very quickly touch on. Let's look at some example log lines first, though, just so you guys can start to figure out some early version of yours if you haven't yet done so. Okay, so the examples we have up here, we have Ozark, Blackish, and Breaking Bad. These are series log lines. Remember, there's a big difference between the series and the pilot log line. Let's look at what makes the series log line work. Ozark, a fast-talking financial advisor drags his family from Chicago to the Missouri Ozarks, where he must launder $500 million in 5 years to appease a drug boss. Well, that makes sense as a 5-year TV show, not a guy getting a candy bar from a machine, right? That seems like a large goal with a big scope. $500 million in 5 years. It's specific. It has a very tangible end finish line to it. We have an idea of who the main character is and who the cast around him would be, which is both his family and also the various criminals that he gets involved with. We know what makes the main character unique and also the specific tactic that he will be using to address his problems. He's a fast talker, right? He's a negotiator. He's a diplomat. He's a trickster. So we know we know what the problem is, we know how your character will solve it, we know who the cast is, we know what the world is like, and we know what the kind of general time frame of the series would be. If you have that sort of really definite endpoint. You don't really need to include an endpoint to the show. Some shows don't have an endpoint, like The Simpsons. What are they working towards or building up to? Nothing. Every episode is just going to be another thing. So that's fine too. You don't need to imply that you're building something. But if you are, then you should include it in the series logline. Let's look at a status quo show. Blackish, half-hour status quo comedy. And notice when you present your idea, you got to include all these things. So that's going to be title, continuity format, genre, and time slot. So make sure to include those in your logline entries. Blackish, a black family man struggles to gain a sense of cultural identity while raising kids in a predominantly white upper-middle-class neighborhood. Okay, so that's not one situation. That's a series of situations. That's describing the type of conflict that will be repeated all throughout the show. Or every conflict will kind of come back to the same idea. It's a little more abstracted, isn't it? Must gain a sense of cultural identity. It's okay if that's a little more abstract in the series logline, especially for a status quo show, because your character is going to be doing different things in every episode, but they all do tie back into that specific theme or type of conflict. And it does tell us the world and the character, right? So still builds out the basics for us, even though it doesn't specifically outline when he gets to move into this neighborhood, he must make 6 pies for the bake sale in order to not get kicked out, right? That would be more like the pilot logline. And then last one that we have is Breaking Bad. Diagnosed with lung cancer, a meek chemistry teacher turns to manufacturing and selling meth in order to secure his family's future. So that's an example of one that doesn't really have an end finish line included in it, but it still gives you the sense of main character, world that they're in, the conflict that they're up against, and the types of conflicts that will be all throughout the show. Okay, that's series logline. I'll do one more slide on pilot logline, and then we will post your guys' loglines. I'll also take questions before we move ahead to that. We have a question right now. Is 1 hour the length of pilot or each episode? It's each episode. Some shows occasionally will have a little bit of a longer first episode, but it's actually not that common, and you would usually still write the pilot at 60 to 65 pages. The only one big exception would be like miniseries or limited series, which sometimes have more like 70-minute pilot scripts. Other questions, let's see. Is pitching adaptations, whether public domain or rights owned, or does that affect pitch success positively or negatively? Pitching adaptations for something with the rights that are owned by someone else there's no point in doing so for the most part. You can write a stunt spec, which is an episode or a pilot or feature that you think has no chance of ever getting made, and you're just doing it to sort of show off your skills and to stand out and get attention. You can do that if you really want to, but don't expect it ever get it made. And you're not going to pitch that show unless, for instance, something crazy happens, which nowadays occasionally can, where you write an adaptation of something and then the rights holders contact you. That would only happen if your show your stunt spec kind of went viral, or if you had a really strong manager or agent who was pushing it around, or if the stars align or something like that. But I typically would not be doing that as anything besides a stunt. And then the other thing I was going to say is pitching public domain adaptations is fine. You can do whatever you want with public domain. Go ahead. Yeah, no, you absolutely should. It won't necessarily affect your chances one way or the other, It might be able to help. It might make your package a little more attractive in some ways, though. So if you're doing a show about, Sherlock Holmes, but what if he was a serial killer instead of a detective? That might be kind of cool. So yeah, take public domain and do whatever you want with it, or take pieces of it. You can incorporate pieces of public domain with no restrictions at all. Somebody in the chat's mentioned Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd century. I thought I was the only one that remembered that cartoon. Question: how about 2-episode pilots? I don't think that's a thing. 2-episode pilots. Maybe some cartoons do that, but we're not doing that. We're doing 1-episode pilots. You can't stretch. There's only one first episode, right? You can't have 2 first episodes. Any other questions? I'm going to move ahead to pilot logline. I'll still read the text chat if you guys post more questions. Don't I have a pilot logline slide? I guess I actually don't in this slideshow. Well, I'll show you the template for it at the very least. Maybe there's no examples of them, mostly because for shows that exist out in the world, they don't really publicize, they don't write internal loglines that they then share with us. This would be something that we would have to kind of construct on our own. Loglines are kind of like internal documents that are used for things like pitching, but you can't exactly go to IMDb and find the official logline for the show. There aren't really official loglines for anything besides our own work. Okay, so pilot logline looks like this. When or after inciting incident, an adjective protagonist must conflict before stakes. It's kind of tricky to get all these things in there, but these are the best questions to answer in the pilot logline. You don't always have to use this exact format, but these are what we're wondering. What starts the story off? Who is the main character in terms of an adjective that describes them in an evocative way that makes it feel like they are the right fit for this story? Must conflict. That's telling us basically what we're doing in the second act, the middle, the meat of the episode, before stakes. That's why they have to do it. Why it matters to them, why it's important that they succeed, and basically what would happen if they didn't act. So this would be, when or after evil samurai slaughter his family. This is where we would pick your adjective for your main character. A reclusive bartender must train as a samurai to defeat them before they ravage his home country, before they devastate the countryside, whatever it is, right? So that's a bad example, but hopefully you can see that we need to be a little more specific in pilot loglines in terms of who is the main character, what are they trying to accomplish, why do they need to do that, and what is the motivation and urgency behind that. It should feel urgent and like they need to act. And then stakes, what happens if they fail? And the stakes can be whatever is appropriate for your genre. It could be, or else they will die. It could be, or else the killer will strike again if you have a high stakes kind of show. Or it might be something like, or if she doesn't win the Battle of the Bands, she's never going to impress her crush, or something like that if it's a lower stakes kind of show. But regardless, we should still understand what those stakes are. Okay, somebody's posted a Wizard of Oz TV guide entry, it looks like, in the chat. So yeah, TV guide entries are usually one sentence, which is similar to a logline. Yeah, we could sort of think of that as a similar thing, but then again, different TV guides are going to write it differently. All right, so let me take any last questions on loglines, or what we're doing right now, before we share. Last questions. And you can raise a hand to ask out loud if you'd like, or you can just use the text chat. I'll also check the stream comments. All right, that looks like all for now. So why don't we just post loglines and share? And I will get to as many as I can within the time that we have. So as we're sharing, you should be prepared to raise a hand and speak out loud and answer questions about your story. And this is not me trying to tear it apart and tell you it's a bad idea. This is intending to diagnose what's working and what's not working and improve the idea as much as possible. If it's already perfect, you don't need to bring it to a workshop or to a class, right? So we're sharing loglines that might be imperfect or have things missing or have parts that aren't really working yet, and you have to just be ready for that. In between loglines, I want to talk a little bit more about genres, but I'm going to take just one logline at a time, try to get to as many as I can. I'll just leave this thing up for genres at the moment. The only thing I'll say about genre for now is limit yourself to 2. Don't write that your show is a fantasy, western, historical comedy. Like, that's just too many things. We can't understand it anymore. You have to limit it to just 2 or less. All right, make sure to include your title, genre, loglines, if you have both, or if just one is fine, and comps. I'm going to pick the ones that include all of those elements. If you haven't included those in your comment post, you can edit it to add those things in. So just click the 3 dots next to it and click edit, and you can add in genre, title, and comps if you've not done that already. Okay, I'm going to, while you guys are posting that, I'm going to bring up our Drive document and post them into that so we can look at them and move the words around. Again, if you're joining us now and are not a member yet, make sure to sign up on scriptcamp.net if you want to persist for the entire course and our many, many, many other classes, workshops, and events. Over 100 hours of classes every month. Scriptcamp.net to sign up. Okay, let's get started. I see one at the top from Watemi. There's no comps or title on it. The length is 1 hour. Okay, I'll take this one because you posted first. And make sure to also specify if this is the series or pilot logline. You should definitely, even if they're not perfect yet, try to include some kind of title or comps if you can. All right, Watemi, feel free to accept the invite to speak, and I will ask questions. Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Going great. Why don't you read out what you have for us?
Wait, so I've had this idea for a while. The logline: in an icy town of Yakutsk, Russia, a mute, indestructible child with a mysterious past captivates a local Russian schoolteacher. She's led to unravel a high-stakes espionage agency involving a secret agent trapped in a malfunctioning childlike cyborg avatar.
Whoa. Okay. So sci-fi should definitely be one of your genres here, probably instead of drama. If we're doing cyborgs and stuff like that, then this is very, very sci-fi. Okay, so 1 hour length. I'm assuming this is a premise show. There's no comps. There's way too much going on here for either a series or pilot logline. I like the setting, and that's nice. The icy town of Yakutsk. That's one of the coldest cities in the world. It's a cool place for this to play out. A mute, indestructible child with a mysterious past captivates a local Russian schoolteacher. So if we're in Russia, you don't need to say local Russian. We know where we are. It's a little redundant. She is led to unravel a high-stakes... So you mean the child or the teacher?
So the teacher is led down to unravel where this mystery child came from, because she thinks it's a real child.
It's not a real child?
No, the child is the cyborg, so it's an espionage plot, and the avatar is a childlike cyborg.
Oh, there's a plot twist in your logline alone, then, because you start by telling us it's a child, then by the end of the logline you're like, wait, no, it's not actually. So did you see how or why there might be too much going on here? We just need one sentence, yes. First of all, so just do one single sentence. And then I think we need to, more important than all these details about the agency and the secret agent trapped in the robot. Oh, that's the same character. Yes. I think you need to simplify this. And so one sentence will help. And then more urgently more important is us to clarify why the character has to do this. Why does the character have to unravel a conspiracy that pertains to this child? What's the motivation?
I don't know yet.
Okay, you don't need to know any of the answers right now. It's okay to just say, I don't know, or I have to work on that, or anything else. So a couple things. Yeah, motivation / urgency. So most people would not get involved in a life and death stakes mystery unless they had a really good reason, right? So you need to clarify what that reason actually is. And if it's something like, I need this, you're sort of... But I guess the other thing is clarify which one of these is the protagonist, right? And we probably want to start with them. So when a small-town Russian school teacher meets a cyborg child that needs her help, you might want to start there, right? If we sort of say she becomes attached to this child, needs to protect, and she bonds with the kid or whatever, I can understand why somebody would then need to help the kid escape from bad guys, or unravel some kind of mystery around the kid if that was the case. But you might just need to make those choices and decide, why does the main character need to get involved? What is the specific objective and the motivation behind it?
So how in the logline would I make it so that the mystery is we the audience think that the child is real, but over the course of the premise we find out he's a cyborg controlled by an adult agent?
Oh, okay. So I would still start with your main character who doesn't know these things yet. So when a small town Russian school teacher meets blank and blank, you might say something like, she soon discovers he's a cyborg and he's being pursued by an agency that she must then escape. Something like that, right? So start with the human woman, because I think that she's your protagonist, it sounds like. And then she's the one that actually needs to act and change and be more active, whereas the kid is like a plot point, a little bit like the kid from Stranger Things or something like that, where it's like mysterious kid with powers now needs the help of the adult. So that might kind of work. Start with the teacher as you're in the logline sentence.
Sweet.
Any questions?
Nope.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's keep it going. We have tons to get through. Eden. Is she still here?
Sorry. I was washing my hands, and I'm here now.
Okay. Hello. We have a new logline for Ecce Homo. Is there a question mark intentionally at the end of that?
Yes.
Does that mean you're not sure?
It is Latin. No. It is Latin for "Are you human?"
Why is there a question?
Or what is human?
But there's intentionally a question mark? Okay, so that's part of the title? Okay, so it's Ecce Homo?
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty unusual, and we don't see very many titles that have especially that are purely foreign words that would then have an unusual punctuation mark at the end of it. So I think you're kind of stacking the deck against yourself when it comes to a title like that. But
you know what? I'm gonna say the question mark is optional.
Okay. Sci-fi drama comps are Zootopia. If I stretch it, do you have another comp, or do you just have the one?
I don't know. Django Unchained, something along those lines. I genuinely. I pulled this one straight out of my behind because I don't think there's like this. I don't know of anything that could be similar to what I have thought up in this twisted little mind of mine. So if you think of something after this conversation or during, feel free to say.
Okay, I will. Or anyone else in the chat also might want to weigh in if they have ideas. I will say comping a Disney movie and a Tarantino movie is absolutely insane. Just does not, like, nobody would know what to make of that in just reading the comps. So I would try to pick ones that match the tone of what you're going for. Is this for adults or is this for kids?
Definitely adults.
Definitely adults. Don't do Zootopia. Okay, in a world... Oh, why don't you read it? Go ahead.
Okay. In a world where genetic engineering breeds a subjugated class, a resilient gaggle of engineered protagonists must navigate abandonment and abuse, forcing deep bonds as they challenge societal norms, offering a poignant social commentary on the nature of humanity and self. It is a work in progress. I am so sorry. It is such a mouthful.
That's fine. Go ahead and finish with the pilot logline.
When a reclusive ex-cage fighter crosses paths with an abused teen, he must crawl out of his comfort zone and allow himself to live again to be a good role model. Okay,
thank you for that. So these sound like two different shows. the series logline and the pilot logline don't even sound like the same worlds. That is a big problem right off the bat. Let's look at them again. A world where genetic engineering breeds a subjugated class, a resilient gaggle of engineered. So don't call them protagonists in the logline. That's a little
right. Okay.
inside baseball, I guess we'd say. Engineered what? Do they all share anything in common? Are they?
Yes. Yes, they're all cat boys.
Okay, thank you.
Or girls.
So you didn't mention that anywhere in these loglines, and that's like one of the main elements of the show.
That's what differentiates them from like the humans, but that is, well, that is pretty much. I mean, I don't know. The fact that they are genetically engineered and made to be subservient is the important part. I just decided that they're gonna be cute little cat boys for brownie points, you know?
Brownie points? Okay. Who's giving you those brownie points for writing a show about cat boys? The internet, maybe? Tumblr, definitely.
Furries.
Yeah.
Furries.
Furries, for sure.
Do you know how much money furries have?
No. Oh, I guess they buy those expensive suits, so they must have some. All right, let me read it back again. In a world where genetic engineering breeds a subjugated class of catboys, a resilient gaggle of engineered blank prisoners, I don't know, whatever they are, must navigate abandonment and abuse, forging deep bonds as they challenge societal norms, offering a poignant social commentary on the nature of humanity and self. If you do say so, humbly yourself. So we can't really say what our show offers in terms of commentary on the nature of humanity and self. I would lose everything after this.
I'm gonna be completely real with you. I threw my unfinished series logline into ChatGPT and just asked it to generate something, so it is what it is.
That's fine.
And it is not good.
It's okay. So in terms of the series logline, everything here is working well. A resilient gaggle of engineered, we would just say what exactly you mean. I'm just going to say prisoners. I don't know what they actually are.
They're not prisoners. They're more like engineered helpers.
Okay, whatever it is, I don't know the answer. You'll fill it in on your own. They must do X specific conflict / task. So what are they trying to do in a larger sense that will take them a couple years to pull off?
Probably assume emancipation or somehow gain their own freedom.
Oh, that's good. That's great. Okay, so must fight for their freedom, etc. You can, fight for their freedom from X or before X if you have something like that. But I totally get the goal of fighting for their freedom. You can totally use that. Pilot logline. When a reclusive ex-cage fighter crosses paths with an abused teen, he must crawl out of his comfort zone and allow himself to live again. Just feels like a purely internal story. That's all stuff going on in your character's mind. I don't have a sense of what the external obstacles are here. And also, if this is about people fighting for their freedom, I don't even see how that pertains to the series logline that you just told us about.
This is how it begins.
Okay.
So these, I'm gonna call them cat boys for clarity's sake.
Okay.
There's this one younger one who's 15, and he's been severely abused and ended up in sort of a pound, and there is it's not really a pound, it's more of a facility to gather these unwanted ones, and this is where he meets this guy who has previously been in these illegal cage fights, and this guy is absolutely having none of the social interaction bullcrap. And suddenly there's this child that looks up to him like father, and the whole conflict of the beginning is basically this guy trying to against himself, like there's a child that looks up to me. I pretty much have to do this for this little boy of my kind.
Okay, so take a look at how you phrase the series logline. These prisoners must fight for their freedom, and then we're going to want to see that in the pilot logline too. So we're going to want to see like the first example of that. or maybe even the...
Right. Okay. There's an overarching plot of one of them being in a trial.
Okay.
It's kind of a background thing, but he's tried for basically biting a person,
Okay.
and they're gonna kill him, but they're not eventually. He the midpoint thing is that he's been pardoned and he enters this facility as one of the abandoned ones, and it kind of turns the whole thing on its head, where the boy becomes the mentor to this basically a kid at heart but very large person who has no idea what a fork is, because he's been pretty much used for fighting and only fighting all his life.
Okay. So that all sounds like later plot development kind of stuff. I would, so just for the purposes of this pilot logline, find that concrete goal that sounds like it comes from the same world as the series logline, and then knock it down to one sentence, and try to keep it external. Don't focus as much on the internal. Leaving the comfort zone and allowing himself to live, those are all psychological problems that the character has to overcome in his mind. Focus on the external obstacles and antagonists that are standing in the way. Any questions?
I mean, yeah, how do you do external obstacles when all of your characters' conflicts are internal, basically?
In the series logline, you say a gaggle of genetically engineered prisoners must fight for their freedom. That doesn't sound internal to me. That can be as external as you need it to be. That sounds like they have... Aren't they enslaved?
Yes, basically, they're not even, they're made. So like the concept of freedom has to be explained to them.
Right. Okay, but still, there are external things standing in the way of them being free, right?
Yes.
There are.
Because they're basically, they have no rights. It's a slavery allegory, basically.
Sure, I understand. Or it's not even an allegory, it just is about slavery, people that are enslaved, right? Okay, yeah. So find that external obstacle and frame the pilot logline around that. Just don't make it feel like it's going to be mostly about a guy sitting around thinking about stuff. Also, there's a couple suggestions in the chat for other comps if you want to look for those. Thank you for suggesting those, guys.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks a lot. All right, let's move to our next one. Vicky.
Hi.
Hello. All right, this is one that I've seen an early version of maybe a couple days ago. Maybe you've updated it and added some stuff?
Yes, what I did was I had that idea on my mind and I wrote it. I don't have like an outline or anything for the series yet.
That's fine. Okay. Do you want to read it out?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the title is Beyond the Signals. It's a horror thriller. It's a premise pilot of 1 hour. My comps are Mandela Catalog 7 and Channel 0. The series logline is: when a series of mysterious disappearances reach a bay town in the south of Chile, two young Wicca twins will join forces with an investigator sent by the US to discover what's behind them before the entire town is gone. And the pilot logline is: when the best friend of two Wicca twins in the south of Chile goes missing, they will have to join forces. No, they will have to join the efforts to find her, fearing that if they don't do it, soon she will be killed.
Nice. Okay, cool. So you've changed the direction of this a little bit since the last version I saw. This worked pretty well and has nice, clearer stakes to it and clearer motivation. So when a series of mysterious disappearances reach a bay town, I think you want more something like they devastate a bay town in the south of Chile. They don't just reach there, they are causing a big problem. That would just kind of clarify what the issue is that needs to be solved. 2 young Wicca twins, don't say will, it's not future tense. They join forces with an investigator sent by the US, so why don't we just say an American investigator, to discover what's behind them before the entire town disappears. Or vanishes, something like that. All right, that looks pretty good. I think I pretty much get the show. Let's look at the pilot. When the best friend of 2 Wicca twins in the south of Chile goes missing, they will join the efforts to find her. Not they will, they just do. They join the efforts to find her, fearing that if they don't soon, she will be killed. So that's maybe not even necessary to mention. I think we can you don't have to necessarily clarify why people would want to find their friend that has gone missing, right? Like, of course we're worried that she might get killed. It's just a little bit redundant to spell it out, I would say. I would use those words on something else that does more for you. So, first of all, I guess you start this off by saying, when the best friend of 2 Wicca twins, it sounds like you're setting up the main character. That's not the main character, though. That's actually it sounds like the catalyst is their best friend going missing. So why don't you start with the protagonist instead? When her best friend goes missing, a blank protagonist and her twin join the efforts to find her, and then expand a little bit more. You have a few words left to, like, do they meet the investigator in the pilot?
At the end of the pilot, so I didn't want it to add him because he doesn't like appear that much.
Wrong idea. You're basically saying that character is not going to be in the show then. You wouldn't present the series logline as featuring a character and then have that character not show up in the pilot. That's just something that, it's a huge mistake. You don't want to only introduce that character at the end of the pilot. You're just never going to get to write more episodes, remember? So you have to not hold all the best stuff back. And if that's part of the very core premise of the show, it has to show up in the pilot. You need that investigator much more. So maybe take that into consideration in how you would rephrase the pilot logline, and then therefore you might be able to include that guy in the logline and say maybe what is the first step? What is the first challenge that they have to face together, right? So maybe the first clue, the first lead they have, their first lead is the local head of a meatpacking plant. You know what I mean? Be specific about what is the direction that they're going to take together now that they have joined forces. But you framed the show as about this team up, so that team up needs to happen in the pilot. Questions?
Yeah, so it should be better that I add the investigator in the first episode then?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. I'm gonna see how I add him.
Okay, sounds good. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Sure. Thanks so much for asking. Or sharing, I should say. Let's move to Charlie. Hi, Charlie.
Hello again. How are you?
Doing good. We have Alterity. Is that how you say that?
Yes.
Okay, great. And looks like you're looking for suggestions for comps too, so if anybody has some, we'd be glad to share
no
those.
idea.
That's fine. Why don't you read what you have?
Okay. For the series logline, it's 25 years after an HEMP takes out the global grid, igniting the Great War of 2000 to 2018. The world gets back on track with reindustrialization.
Whoa, okay.
The
Go ahead.
pilot logline is a working class finance crackerjack is forced to take a job tracking down a wealthy socialite when his family and illegal business are threatened.
All right, thanks for that. So this is drama mystery, but does this take place in the future, or is this kind of like an alternate 2023?
Exactly. It's an alternate history present day.
Okay, sounds good. 25 years. HEMP, that's an electromagnetic pulse, right? I'm not sure what the H is, but
It is. It's a high altitude electric magnetic impulse. So.
okay. I just because I think a lot of people are more familiar with EMP from all the movies and video games that we've played before, I might consider just being a little reductive and just calling it an EMP, just so there's not that question right off the bat of, wait, what do you mean exactly? So just simplify a little bit.
Okay.
25 years after EMPs took out most of the global grid, igniting the Great War of 2000 to 2018, the world gets back on track with reindustrialization. It's a cool world, but the series logline is way too big in scope. The world gets back on track. It's not a cast of characters, and it's not a specific setting. Where is this set in the world?
So my initial concept is that for each series, you meet almost like a new cast of characters. Like the first season's going to focus on a particular character in their story, and then the next season you could just shift your focus to somewhere else in the world. Like it's people dealing with the present day under this new condition.
Okay.
And the first season is specifically in the UK. So I localize each season, but it's a global size series premise, if that makes sense.
I see what you mean, but it's not serving you to describe the entire series in the series logline. It sounds more like you need to describe the first season in the series logline. This is like an anthological limited series in that case, and we just need to know what is the first season going to be about. So yeah, forget the whole scope of the bigger show. It's a cool world. I think that's nice, but just you may not have room to fully communicate the grand vision for what would be year 2 or year 5 of the show. Let's focus on the first season. So rethink the series logline along those lines. And the pilot logline is a working class finance crackerjack. What is that?
A crackerjack is someone who has like marked ability or really excellent in something. So he's really good with numbers. He's like a financial whiz kid.
Define working class. A socioeconomic group consisting of people who are employed in manual or industrial work. That doesn't sound like that's what your character is doing.
He is. So the whole premise of the show with having the alternative history setup is this juxtaposition of a world where essentially after reindustrialization, like due to the war, there are polarized have and have nots, and he's in the working class category. So the financial aspect, he's really good with numbers, but he's essentially barred from entry into the world of finance because that's for rich people. So he has the ability, he just doesn't have the social mobility to do that field. So he's like he's working class because he's a bartender when we start the story. Like he's barred from the entry of entering the financial realm and making money.
In that case, then you would say he's like a bartender with a head for numbers then, right?
Okay.
If you describe him as a financial whiz or whatever, it sounds like that's already his job. When in reality, you're saying
he does it
good
illegally. He does it illegally. He has an illegal side business where he is doing that. He just can't do it legally in this world because of the polarization of classes, like the stratification that happens after the war. Working class people are basically priced out of living a certain lifestyle.
Oh, well, that's not too different from today. I guess that's your point.
Not too much, yeah, and not too much. It'll just be a lot more stark, even visually, the way that I see it, yeah. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
So let's do a couple things in the logline. First of all, if you're going to do cause and effect, don't give us the effect and then the cause. So when his family and illegal business are threatened should be the first thing.
Okay.
That's the cause. And the effect is the bartender who runs the side financial business, or however you want to phrase it, I'm just going to put that in italics so you can rephrase that on your own, is forced to take a job. So why don't we just say he must track down a wealthy socialite and what? What's the problem? What's the conflict? What's so hard about tracking down the socialite?
Beyond him not wanting to, he...
It's okay if you're not sure.
Yeah, I'm not right off the bat set up
That's-
this way.
Yeah, it's totally fine. We're in the logline phase. You don't need to have all the answers, and we have a whole week before we have the week one anyway. So this is just questions for you to answer. The conflict and the problem. So I get what he's doing.
Okay.
He's tracking someone down. I get essentially why he's doing it. His business and family are in trouble. I guess they're threatened by criminals or corrupt government people or something like that. But then I need a little more specifics on actually what the issue is in this episode. So
Okay.
I get tracking people down can be hard, but what's the obstacle? What's standing in the way?
Okay.
So try answering those questions and rethink the series logline to describe the first full season, and you should be all set.
Perfect. All right. Awesome. Thank you.
No problem. And last thing is that by saying mystery, you're telling us there's a central question at the heart of this, at least of the season. If you can,
Yes.
I would try to clarify that in the log lines that you have here. Because right now I'm like, where's the mystery?
Clarify the
Yeah, what's the mystery?
clarify the mystery to the show is essentially what happens in the alternative historical timeline. There's an EMP that goes off, and it cascades into a bunch of global exchanges happening that knocks out the grid. And for like the every average day person, they don't really know the whole story. If
But
that
that's-
makes sense.
Not quite, no. So a mystery is like... That sounds like that's in the backstory of your world. A mystery
It
would be
is.
an urgent and pressing question that your characters are trying to figure out the answer to, and when they figure out the answer, the story's over, basically. So I think if there is a central mystery, then you can highlight it in the log lines. If you realize there kind of isn't one, this might be better off as something like drama/sci-fi.
Okay.
Because mystery just promises a strong central question. Like, who killed this person? You know what I mean? Like, even think of a complex mystery like Watchmen, right? Watchmen is a very big ensemble story with a lot going on, but it's framed around who killed the comedian, right? It's like as simple as that. There's a question that we can answer: who, what, when, where, or why. I guess when is not a great question to ask for the most part. It's usually going to be more like who, why, or what. So look for a question like that. Or if it turns out that there isn't really a mystery that you want to focus on as much, then you might just want to change around how you present the genres.
Okay.
Any questions?
No, very helpful. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Charlie. Let me pause and see if there's any questions in the chat that I have not gotten to before I move to the next one. I see a question from Emily. Advice for writing romance or romantic loglines? You have identified one of my biggest weak points because I don't really watch, write, or read romance stuff. But I can tell you that a lot of the time they're going to be two-handers, meaning there's two equally important characters. If not, then there's going to be one character that is sort of... Well, I don't know. On TV, though, is that different? I'm not the best person to ask. I think that in TV romance, they're more likely going to be two-handers, yeah. So it's something like You're the Worst on FX. We follow a relationship. We're not following one person trying to win the other person over. So don't think of it as much like you would a movie. I think romance on TV is more about long-lasting relationships and the various problems that come up in trying to make those work, or people, breaking up, getting back together, etc. It's not really like a movie would be more about, the girl wants to win over the drummer guy, so she enters the battle of the bands with the hope of impressing him and sort of, quote, winning him over, right? But TV shows are going to be a little bit more nuanced and complicated than that, and it's going to be a little bit more like, when two dysfunctional people, one from the big city and one from the small town, enter a relationship, they realize they're now going to have to live on the same farm together and must deal with these challenges and problems. So it's more like you're going to describe the types of problems that are going to be plaguing the relationship and the ways that your characters overcome those or attempt to resolve that or just bounce off each other in interesting ways. Ask someone else, though, because that is my biggest weak point, unfortunately. Okay, so, or maybe romance TV might be more like about bigger groups for the most part. Like even something like Friends or Coupling, the UK show that's kind of like UK Friends. It's sort of, or How I Met Your Mother is kind of a romance show too, right? So I would think of it more like about an ensemble, if it's going to be like that kind of romance, an ensemble, all of which are kind of dating each other. Yeah, that might be a better way to think of a lot of them. I guess it depends on the nuances of your specific story, and I just don't really watch enough of this to be able to tell you very well. Okay, let's keep going. We'll get as many as we can in terms of log lines. I see one for the Divine Sisters. For some reason, I'm seeing your name as abbreviated, just A ... Hello.
Hi.
Can you tell us what name we can call you?
Archer is fine.
Archer. Okay, got it. Thank you. I don't know why I still can't see some names on Discord. Okay, why don't you read out what you have for us here? We have full hour action adventure show.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Let me scroll up a little bit. Give me a second. Series logline: when her angel sister crashes her wedding, a demon must venture with her across the United States to fight the 7 deadly sins in an effort to rescue their kidnapped father before the war to end all wars begin. The pilot logline is: after a demon encounters a sardonic magician, they spend more time with one another and marry despite her being of demonic blood.
All right, thank you for this. So, this is action adventure I would probably put fantasy in there as well. Maybe just pick one or the other.
Yeah.
Fantasy adventure, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, when her angel sister crashes her wedding, a demon must venture with her across the U.S. to fight the 7 deadly sins in an effort to rescue their kidnapped father before the war to end all wars. You don't need to say it begins. So it sounds like you may have kind of misidentified the cause and effect here. The first thing, I think what you want to start with is when their father's kidnapped. Right?
All right. Mm-hmm.
So when their father's kidnapped, I guess you're saying the angel is your sort of central protagonist. Oh, no, sorry. The demon is your central protagonist. Is that right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when her father is kidnapped, a demon must join with her angelic sister to do blank and blank. So start with that. Start with start with the problem. Start with cause. Mm-hmm. Kidnapped father. A XXX demon must, join her angel sister on a road trip to do X before X. Okay, and so my guess is that the father is part of a ritual or something like that, so they can only start this apocalyptic war with him or using him somehow. Is that right?
What it is that the father in question is Gabriel, the left hand of God. And since the angels have discovered that one of their higher-ups, for literally the second most higher up, is missing, they believe that it's hell that's behind it, and they're about to go to war.
And if they rescue their father, the war won't happen? Why?
Because he will be the one bringing things back down. He will be the one to essentially calm things back over.
Oh. Okay, so he will find a way to make
What's
peace.
revealed... Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
You're fine. So despite the fact that they kidnapped him in the first place, if he escapes, that they will then accept a peace deal brokered by the guy that just was rescued from captivity?
See, the 7 deadly sins in this case are more acting rogue. They are separated from the demons down below. As a matter of fact, in what I have planned for the second episode is that they're going to go, the demon and angel in question are going to go down below to see if they can get any more intel. And they find out that hell is being overloaded with the new souls that heaven is not accepting anymore.
Okay.
Heaven's on full lockdown.
So maybe try something like when their father is kidnapped by the 7 deadly sins, if that's the case. You're saying that they don't represent hell in that case?
In this case, they do not.
They don't.
As
Okay,
a
so it's a
matter of
separate
fact-
faction. Go ahead.
Yep.
Or maybe you'll even want to say is kidnapped by rogue demons or something like that.
Yes.
And then an X-demon must join her angel sister on a trip to do X and X before X. Okay, that makes more sense now that you've clarified that there are 3 factions here, not just 2.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Pilot. After a demon encounters a sardonic magician, they spend more time with one another and marry despite her being of demonic blood. This sounds like a completely different show from the series logline.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the same demon that you mentioned before?
It is the very same demon, yes.
Okay. So she encountered... This sounds like the backstory of her wedding.
It's the pilot is supposed to lead up to the wedding. The ending of the pilot is when the angel sister crashes it.
Okay, so huge
tells
mistake.
her,
Don't do that. So the series logline should be something that comes up, like the pilot is the first step of the series logline that you've told us. So it's like you need to capitalize on it and take advantage of the elements that you've given us in the series logline in the pilot. Don't make the last event of your pilot the series engaging and kicking into gear. That would be like, so this happens so often in, well, I see a lot of this, I guess I should say. Imagine like Breaking Bad, most famous show ever made or whatever, right? If a lot of attempts at writing that would be something like Walt and Jesse meet at the end of the pilot, right? But that's not how it works at all. We have them meet before the halfway mark, and they're already making meth together by the premise scenes of the show throughout the whole middle of the show. So the series logline and pilot logline need to be tied together. The pilot is just the first chapter of the series that you've explained to us. It's not like a prologue.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so I would start your story later. The pilot starts, like, you can still have this might be like the first act of your pilot or something like that. This could still happen early on, but the majority of what we're seeing still needs to be kicking into gear or engaging with the series logline that you've given us. So it would be like, now the first, think of like they're on a road trip, right? So what's the first destination they have to get to, and the first major problem, and that's sort of maybe what your pilot would hinge around, right? So maybe we need to get from Reno to, I don't know, what's another city in Nevada? I can't think of any. Nevada City. How about that? We need to get from Reno to Nevada City, but we have to get down a highway that is being guarded by the sin of greed. You see what I mean? That's like the first of the 7 deadly sins that we're going to be fighting in the show, and the pilot then becomes the first chapter of the series that you've presented to us. I hope that makes sense. Any questions?
No, I think that about covers it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing this. Sounds cool. Sort of American Gods kind of vibe to it. Maybe a good comp.
A little bit, yeah.
Do you have comps on here? Oh, you do have a couple. Charmed, Supernatural, and Constantine. Charmed is a sitcom, right?
A little bit of a sitcom, yeah.
I would
but
not
I was
use
going
Charmed.
with that. I was going with that more for the magical vibe it has. So
okay.
Yeah, I can dump Charmed and use Supernatural, Constantine, because those fit more closer.
Yeah, Supernatural, Constantine, American Gods are sort of like the modern Neil Gaiman kind of stuff like that. Good Omens, maybe. So yeah, only narrow it down to 2, but it sounds like Supernatural and Constantine. I totally get the tone from that. All right, thank you for sharing.
No problem. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Archer. Let's look at Screenplayer's pilot, Colossus. While we're waiting for Screenplayer to join the stage, I see a question in the chat. Are these loglines mainly ones you'll be using for your 6-week pilot or 6-week TV plot? Yes, this is in preparation for the upcoming boot camp. Week 1 is next week. So folks are getting some early work done, some early feedback on their loglines. It doesn't have to be perfect yet. It can be an early stage of it, and just do as much as you can. Okay, Screenplayer, if you can accept the invitation to speak on stage. Let me check that they're still in the room. I think they are in the room. I've invited them to speak. If you can find that green accept button and click accept, then you can speak on stage. If not, I'll move down to Raven. Okay, we'll start with Raven.
Alrighty.
Hello. So, Scraps, we have a dark fantasy comedy, half-hour pilots. Why don't you start us off by reading it out?
Okay, let me scroll back to where it was. Okay. The title is Scraps. The genre is a dark fantasy comedy. Format's 30-minute pilot. Comparisons are Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Chalk Zone, The Amazing World of Gumball, A Touch of Drawn Together, and a sprinkling of BoJack Horseman. series logline is a group of discarded fictional characters live and work in a surreal sanctuary in an attempt to find new stories to belong in. And the pilot logline is, after being abandoned by his creator, a theatrical humanoid joins a surreal sanctuary for fictional characters seeking to inhabit new stories to avoid disappearing.
All right, thanks for this. So this is animated, is that right?
Yep.
Yes, okay. I would trim your genre down to just two things. So this sounds more comedic to me. Dark fantasy may be a little bit too much. I would just say fantasy comedy for this one. This sounds more just like a cartoon or sitcom to me.
Cool. Yeah.
So half hour, I totally get it. Foster son from Imaginary Friends, almost. If I remember correctly, that's a pretty similar premise. Am I right? That's like there is kind of a kid that lives with a bunch of imaginary characters in a house. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, so pretty similar to that one. If you can differentiate or make it stand out a little more, that might help, but it's not a huge problem that it sounds like something else.
Yeah.
I would narrow your prompts down to just two as well, by the way. Go ahead.
Okay, just two works. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that case, in Foster's Home, it basically mainly talks about imaginary friends, and here with my logline, I was thinking that like fictional characters that are created by authors or creators and such that they just discard and are like, we don't need you anymore. They end up having to find a place that they actually would be able to belong in, or else they risk disappearing into the ether, which I don't think authors had that much of an existential threat.
You're right. That is useful. So let me just ask though. So when you say discarded fictional characters, do you mean like characters that the author thought of but never developed enough to include in a book or something? Or do you mean like fictional characters from old series?
That the author thought up and then they're like, you know what, you're not working for my project that I'm creating. I'm just going to kind of toss you in the scrap pile.
Okay, I think I get it. So they live and work in a surreal sanctuary in an attempt to find new stories to belong in. I think your series logline's working well. After being abandoned by his creator, a theatrical humanoid, I don't understand what that is or means. What is a theatrical humanoid?
The main character is like is a humanoid character, but he's not like human, and he has a theatrical personality.
If he's not a human, what is he?
He's kind of like almost like an owlish type character.
Okay, so that I think you would need to. Well, I think the point is that he's the is he like a cartoon, or I guess everyone's a cartoon. So you're sort of saying, I'm not quite sure exactly how to phrase this one. Humanoid just seems like the wrong.
With that too.
Yeah, it's a little tough. I mean, owl man. I don't know exactly what you would say. But then theatrical owl man just sounds kind of unusual. So I'm not quite sure how to phrase your character in the pilot logline. Let me give it some more thought. Joins a surreal sanctuary. Okay, we get that for fictional characters seeking to inhabit new stories to avoid disappearing. So this is working okay, but it's essentially just restating the pilot or restating the series logline. So I would just find that first challenge. What's the first obstacle that they have to actually overcome? Oftentimes, when you're writing a person joins group type of pilot, it's going to be the thing that they need to do to prove their worth or belong there, right? So it's going to be like, in order to find his place here, he must complete this challenge, or we have to help them move a couch in order to earn their trust, or something like that, right? So find a little bit more of a specific conflict for the pilot logline.
Yeah, so include the specific conflict that he has to solve in order to join them in the pilot logline.
Yes, exactly. A lot of the time, new person joins shows are going to be kind of like that. They don't have a place yet, but they need to earn their place.
Well, I will adjust that then.
Perfect. Any questions on this one?
I don't think so. I think that answered all the questions that I had about it.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, no worries. Thanks for sharing. I think I can do one more. Let me see. Screenplayer, are you still here? Can I bring you up? Hello. There you are. Okay, so let's do our last logline for today with Screenplayer. Everybody else, if I did not get to you, then we have week 1 next week. So continue working, refining. You can post your script for feedback or post your logline for feedback in our feedback channel if you'd like to. And you can get feedback or discuss your idea during this upcoming week on Script Camp. Our Discord community is entirely dedicated to doing this. We have lots of workshops and events and places and times for you to do that refinement before we get to next week's class, and then you can bring the logline to that one, which is also free and open to everyone. Reminder that you can sign up at scriptcamp.net. You can sign up for unlimited membership to get access to every single class, event, and workshop that we have here on all of our servers, not just Script Camp. So we're at our time. I'm going to continue just for these last couple minutes just to finish out this last one. But you can feel free to stay and watch this last feedback if you want to. If not, we would love to see you back here next week. Thank you so much, guys. Okay, let's do, what's it called? Oh, I just had it. This is Colossus. Can you read what you have for us?
Yes. Just have double L actually. The spell check has done it. So, okay. Matter.
All right, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so series logline is when a decade-long peace pact is broken and world is plunged into war raised by an atrocious king, a brave young prince and princess must sacrifice their newfound love to protect their kingdom and families from times of turmoil.
Okay, and looks like you have 2 different ideas for pilot loglines, is that right?
Yes. I have 2 different because they are different point of views and there is no way I can connect them. But down the line they will get connected, so I will just read out both.
Go ahead.
So the first idea is a responsible single father striving for a peaceful world for his children must get into political power to negate the threat of war caused by an atrocious king before it manifests into reality. And the second one is a self-doubting, impulsive prince must realize his worth on the day of reckoning when he will be faced his menacing arch-rival for the ultimate glory of his life.
All right, thank you for that. So there's lots to get into here. Let's look at some of the basics. So Colossus fantasy drama, 1 hour. Comps are Game of Thrones and Last Kingdom. When a decade-long peace pact is broken and the world is plunged into war by an atrocious king, or we could just say, well, never mind. A brave young prince and princess must sacrifice their newfound love to protect their kingdom and families. What does it mean to sacrifice their newfound love?
The thing is that they are entitled to inherit their thrones by traditions, and their kingdoms are like miles apart from each other. So they have to make this choice of. So they are actually together at a place called Enhancement in their teenage, where they spend 4 years, and after everyone goes home, after completing, it's like college, you can call it, but it's very different than that. And then they are fallen in love there, but since they have to have duties to their kingdoms and they are obliged to inherit their thrones, they can't continue the love. They have to choose between love and duty.
But that sounds like the subtext. Go ahead.
The thing is that it will be an easier choice if their kingdoms are intact, but when they will go back to their kingdoms, they will be threatened by the war raised by this atrocious king. That is when they came to this place, they were unknown of this world, whatever happening is outside, and when they will return, their kingdoms are totally plunged into war and facing adversities, which wasn't the case when they left them.
So I'm still not quite understanding. So they have to sacrifice their love. That's saying they have to not be married, right? So that's telling us what they're not doing. But what are they doing? How do they address the problem? How are they going about protecting their kingdoms and families? Are they raising armies and stuff?
They do have armies, and they, actually the hero's or prince's kingdom is already taken by the king, and he has to free it from him, and the princess's kingdom is not yet taken. It's more powerful, so it can, all the they eventually they're gonna need to join forces down the line,
but not in
and
the pilot.
maybe they found not in the pilot, not even in the series, maybe.
Oh, they never join forces. Okay, so it sounds like you're still
They
going at. Go ahead.
Yeah, they will eventually find, but not in the series as long as I have planned it. It's further down in the somewhere in the story.
Okay, I
Not
guess it
immediately.
sounds like you're sort of focusing on what they're not doing. So I need for a logline, we need to say what the characters are doing. So can you be a little more specific on how they're going to defend the kingdom from these invaders or the evil king? It's okay if you need more time or you're not sure how to clarify that too much right now.
Yes, I think the sacrifice of love, as it just adds the element of what can I say? It will be easy for them to go and protect their kingdoms, but they have to face this internal conflict and choice they are making for the duties of their duties they have to their kingdoms. So should I just not include it in the logline?
Maybe. Wait, did you just say it'll be easy for them to defend their kingdoms from the evil antagonist?
No,
No.
It won't be easy. But I think this is an external sort of conflict, because the love they have for each other, they are ignoring it totally for the sake of their kingdoms. So that is one thing, and the way they are going to fight this king is by eventually it's going to lead to a war, but there is a lot of build up to the war, and they will have to organize, they will have to get the other kingdoms to their sides and fight against this.
Okay, so build alliances and prepare a defense of their kingdom, something like that.
Build alliances, yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so that's I can understand that. That sounds active and interesting, and I get what the show would sort of be. So when an evil king breaks a pact and threatens the world with war, a prince and princess must create new alliances and prepare to defend their kingdom from the upcoming onslaught. Is that right?
Yeah, this is what they will physically be doing, but they will also be sacrificing their love. So I just
okay, but that's
should
all,
I just
that's
include
internal.
it or not?
I would not. Don't include it. No, that's just internal stuff. Focus on the external threats and problems. So when an evil king threatens the world with war, a brave young prince and princess must build alliances and defend their kingdoms from invasion. Something like that. Okay, I'll paste that in the chat. If you want to use that, you don't have to use exactly that, but just something like that. Let's look at the pilots. So a responsible... go ahead.
Yeah, also I know for the entire season I have just focused on the prince and princess for their point of view, but there is also another major important character which is not quite connected to the war, but it will spark the beginning of the war in a sense. But it has nothing to do. It doesn't. That character doesn't care about the war, but it has an major arc and major action in the entire series. So should I just neglect it because it's multiple POV kind of?
Don't even include it. You don't have room. Okay, pilots. A responsible single father striving for a peaceful world for his children must get into political power to negate the threat of war caused by an atrocious king before it manifests into reality. Is the single father the prince?
No, it's the prince and the princess are not directly in the conflict right away. They are, they are unaware of the conflict. So this conflict is happening at a different place, and this is another major character. The responsible single father is who is in the middle of the conflict, where we will in the pilot we will give the sense of it,
So
what the show is going to be about.
So the pilot logline needs to feel connected to the series logline. So I would not write a story that sounds like a completely different story as the two separate loglines, right? So I would pick your second one here. A self-doubting, impulsive prince must realize his worth on the day of reckoning, when he will face his menacing arch-rival for the ultimate glory of his life. I'm not actually sure I understand most of this. I think you need to make it sound like the pilot is going to be the first step in the series journey that you've presented here. So it might start with the king threatening the war, or your main character learning about that, and then we're going to sort of see the first challenge, or the first step in securing these alliances and defending their kingdom from invasion. So maybe he has to complete a diplomacy mission to a nearby kingdom to get them to join forces with their home kingdom, or something like that, right? So think a little bit smaller scale. What is the first of the many steps that will be required to defend their kingdom and defeat these invaders?
But they are still they are totally unaware of this war that is being raised by this king. Until in the pilot they will not be aware of it. Is it okay to be like that?
No. In that case, you need a completely different series logline. This is I've given this note a couple times to previous students that have shared their loglines. You don't want to have the pilot lead up to the series logline that you've given us. If that's the case, then it's just like a totally different show. You need to rethink either one or the other. You can't have the show start. It's like your pilot isn't a prologue. Your pilot is the first chapter. So you will either need to change the series logline to make whatever is happening here the first chapter of that larger conflict, or you need to think of the pilot as the first obstacle along the way of addressing the problem that you've outlined in the series logline. So you probably don't want to have your characters not even find out about the main thrust of the conflict in the first episode at all. That seems like a pretty big misstep. Make sense?
Yeah, made sense.
Okay, any questions?
No, I think.
Okay, sounds good. So let me just summarize and recap that. So pilot shouldn't be a prologue. This is the first chapter or step in accomplishing the larger goal outlined or as written in series logline. So you might need to just adjust how you present the information, or you might need to change the specifics of the goal in the pilot. But I think I see what the bigger arc of the show would be. Thank you so much for sharing. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you for...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and next week, if you want to bring it back with a revised version, then I'm glad to look at it again.
Yeah.
Thanks, Screenplayer.
Okay,
we are at the end of our class today. We're over time at this point. Thank you so much for coming. This was a big group and a lot of really great questions, and it's hard to share loglines and early stages of work and things like this. So we really appreciate you guys bringing this all out and having so much great stuff for us. Next week, we'd love to see you back. I will prioritize people who haven't shared loglines yet, but if you bring a revised version, and if we have time, I'm glad to look at those and get to them. We also have Lab on Saturdays. Lab is every Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. So if you're a member, you can come by and get as much unlimited feedback as you want. And then in the feedback channel, which is a text channel in the Discord, then you can post it anytime and have the community weigh in and give you additional help, resources, or ideas. Thank you guys so much for coming. We hope to see you soon, maybe next week for more TV classes. But if not, then at your next script camp class or event. I will leave you today with just the schedule of the upcoming boot camps. We have TV, feature, and novel running right now. So we have features Fridays 6 to 8 starting on December 1st. We have this class, which runs 10 to noon on Sundays starting today for next 6 weeks. And then we have novel boot camp, which runs on our server WordCamp, which is novel writing focused. And that is running 12 to 2 on Saturdays up through the end of January. So we are wrapping those up around January 21st. That one is about halfway through, but you're welcome to still come by and participate if you want to. We hope to see you at any of these upcoming classes or at anything else on the server. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great